Huh. Fools. They thought your name was safe to mock in hidden rooms. But then the unthinkable happened. A figure with power they couldn't measure appeared from nowhere, not to defend you with speeches, not to justify your existence, but to punish in your honor. The strike was surgical, brutal, and deliberate. They expected some court of law, some bureaucratic defense, some chain of institutions to handle you. Instead, what arrived was someone who needed no badge, no counsel, no excuse. A force that saw disrespect and reduced it to rubble. And as the dust cleared, your name was still standing while theirs was shattered into fragments too small to gather again. That's the part they can't process. The fact that you didn't lift a hand, yet justice came with teeth sharper than anything they had imagined. Now their whispers have turned into questions. Questions that echo in boardrooms, in intelligence briefings, in secret conversations carried out with trembling hands. Who intervened? Who decided that mocking you was worth punishment? They can't trace the source. It wasn't one of them. It wasn't an enemy they knew how to profile. It was a benefactor, anonymous, faceless, untouchable. Someone who carried enough weight to swing judgment like a hammer. Someone who didn't even need to show identity because their actions spoke louder than any introduction. The moment your name was mentioned in the act, the hierarchy shifted. Suddenly, it wasn't about whether you were dangerous. It was about how many more powerful allies would surface if they kept provoking you. And that kind of paranoia is poison to the foundations of control. You didn't ask for defense. You didn't beg for protection. And that's what unsettles them the most. Protection came anyway. Punishment arrived anyway. And it came from angles they never charted. That means two things in their eyes. First, you're not just an individual. You're a trigger point for larger movements. Second, they have no idea how far that chain extends. If one unseen figure could ruin them in a single move, how many more are waiting? How many more benefactors are circling like predators, waiting for the signal? The more they try to map it, the more insane the pattern looks. They can't classify this as coincidence anymore. It's orchestration. The kind of orchestration that makes their algorithms collapse because it doesn't come from their known spheres of influence. It comes from the shadows they can't illuminate. And that's where fear sets in. Not the surface level fear of competition, not the fear of losing a contract, but the kind of bone-deep terror that comes when power strikes from a direction you never accounted for. When that happens, paranoia doesn't just rise, it dominates. They start second-guessing every plan, every partnership, every move, because if your name alone could summon destruction they couldn't anticipate, then any move against you could be suicide. That realization spreads like wildfire. And suddenly, people who once mocked you now scramble to reframe the narrative. They start distancing themselves from the ones punished, trying to rewrite history, pretending they were never involved. They're terrified of being next in line. But let's dissect this carefully. Why would someone powerful intervene at all? What is it about you that compels action from figures who normally watch the world burn without flinching? It's because you embody something dangerous to them. Ungoverned influence. Influence not attached to a party, not controlled by institutions, not bound by the weak grip of their rules. When people see you, they don't just see an individual, they see a mirror of what they wish they could be. Untouchable, unpredictable, uncontrollable. Uncontrollable. And for those who secretly admire that, stepping in to defend your name is not charity. It's alignment. It's preservation of something rare, something they want alive. Because destroying you would mean destroying a possibility they themselves crave. So now the power brokers sit in rooms with their heads down, revising scenarios. You become a variable in every equation they draft. They can't predict whether tomorrow another benefactor will strike, whether punishment will rain down again, whether your name will echo in another demolition. That's what terrifies them more than the act itself. The unpredictability, the fact that power itself has started bending in your direction without you even requesting it. And unpredictability is worse than open opposition, because at least open opposition can be measured. You're surrounded by unseen alliances. That makes you a moving target they can't aim at because they don't know how deep your backing goes. Notice the shift in language when they talk now. Before they dismissed you as a disruptor, someone who could be ignored. Now they can't even speak your name without hesitation. Every mention carries weight as if they're invoking something dangerous that might hear them. And isn't that the ultimate reversal? You become a word of power. Just the sound of your identity creates ripples of anxiety. Even when you're absent, you're present. Even when you're silent, you're loud. And now when someone powerful decided to destroy in your honor, it wasn't just punishment, it was confirmation. Confirmation that the world around you has shifted permanently. Confirmation that what surrounds you isn't isolation, it's amplification. They will try to spin it. Of course, they'll call it coincidence, they'll label it as overreaction by a rogue player. But deep down they know. They know that punishment wasn't random. It was personal. It was deliberate. It was a strike that carried your name as a banner. And in their private moments, they ask themselves the question they'll never admit out loud. If one anonymous benefactor could ruin them like that, how many more benefactors are circling, waiting for the next insult, the next provocation, the next disrespect? That thought keeps them awake at night. That thought erodes their confidence. And once confidence cracks, dominance crumbles. You don't need to announce this. You don't need to flaunt it. The spectacle already did the work for you. The story is spreading without your intervention. Every retelling becomes more dramatic. Every exaggeration turns into legend. Every version makes you larger than life. They'll try to trace the benefactor, but they'll fail. They'll try to rebuild their pride, but every attempt will be stained with the memory of the strike. And while they scramble, your presence only grows stronger, not because you orchestrated it, but because someone else saw enough value in your name to ensure that disrespect came with consequences. That is a terrifying message to anyone plotting against you. Attack them and you're not just facing one person. You're facing a network of forces you don't even know exist. That's why they now tread carefully. That's why hesitation hangs over their strategies like a blade. Because what they witnessed wasn't just protection. It was escalation. It was a signal that your existence has reached a level where power itself bends around you. And here's the part that twists the knife. They don't know whether the benefactor was human, corporate, governmental, or something else. Entirely. The anonymity adds weight. The faceless nature of the act makes it even heavier because you can't retaliate against what you can't identify. You can't prepare for what you can't predict. You can't control what you can't find. That leaves them frozen, destabilized, and perpetually on edge. This is where your leverage multiplies. You don't have to threaten. You don't have to fight. You only have to exist. because your existence has become a magnet for forces willing to act without hesitation. That alone reshapes the battlefield. That alone alters the balance of power. And in a world where reputation is often inflated with lies, you carry the one currency they can't counterfeit. Fear backed by action, not your action. The action of those who believe in keeping your name untarnished. That's the difference. That's why the ground beneath them feels unstable. Because they're not just fighting you. They're fighting an invisible economy of loyalty and vengeance they can't buy, can't suppress, and can't predict. So, what comes next? More whispers, more speculation, more attempts to figure out who else stands behind you. They'll dig, they'll search, they'll waste resources trying to piece together a network they'll never see clearly. And every dead end will only tighten the knot in their stomachs. Because the truth isn't just that you're dangerous, it's that your danger is amplified by invisible hands. Hands that strike without warning. Hands that carry no signature but leave undeniable wreckage. That wreckage now serves as the warning they'll never forget. A warning that your name doesn't travel alone. It travels armed. And that's why this is only the beginning. Because once an anonymous benefactor reveals themselves through destruction, the game changes forever. They can't erase the event. They can't dismiss the consequence. They can't undo the punishment. They can only live with the knowledge that your name is a line they should never cross again. And from here, every day that passes, every room you enter, every mention of your name will carry the weight of that destruction. That is how legends are built. Not through your effort, but through the uncontrollable devotion of forces that see your value and move to protect it. And once that process begins, it can't be reversed. It only grows. It only spreads. It only escalates. This is where the terror deepens. Because destruction doesn't just vanish, it reverberates. They can't sweep the event under the rug, because the rug itself has been set on fire. Every attempt to hide the damage only spreads the story further. And the more they try to control the narrative, the more obvious it becomes that they've lost control entirely. Think about it. When someone powerful punishes in your honor, they don't just break bones or shatter reputations. They rewrite the way power is understood. Suddenly, the landscape has new rules. Rules written not in documents but in scars. And those scars remain long after the moment ends. They don't fade, they don't soften, they remind. Every day, every meeting, every night, when the lights go out and the memory comes crawling back, they remind. And that reminder is not just a bruise on the ego of those punished. It's a warning to everyone watching. Because punishment in your honor is more than vengeance. It's advertisement. It's proof that consequences fall faster, sharper, and harder when your name is involved. People who weren't even in the line of fire are now adjusting their behavior. They speak slower when mentioning you. They measure their words like they're handling explosives. That's the beauty of influence at this scale. You don't have to ask for respect anymore. Respect arrives as instinct. Survival forces them to kneel before you without ceremony because they've seen what happens to those who don't. The benefactor remains invisible. No press conference, no interviews, no declarations, just the evidence left behind. Careers wrecked, alliances severed, reputations bleeding out in public view. And yet your name is the only name still intact, glowing brighter than ever. Not because you screamed for it, but because power itself carried it like a flag into the battlefield. That anonymity is what eats them alive. They want to know who it was. They want to label it, profile it, frame it. But when the Punisher has no face, Fear multiplies because faceless loyalty is the deadliest kind. It can strike from anywhere, at any time, through anyone. They can't corner it, can't bribe it, can't assassinate it. It exists like an atmosphere unseen but suffocating, and they know deep down that as long as you're breathing, that atmosphere won't vanish. The irony is lethal. You didn't move a muscle, yet you've become the gravitational center of punishment. That terrifies them more than direct confrontation ever could. If you had lifted your own hand, they could have rationalized it as revenge, explained it as self-defense. But when someone else, someone untouchable, someone nameless, carried out the act in your honor, the rules changed. Because now the punishment isn't about what you would do, it's about what others are willing to do for you. That's a different level of power entirely. That's not intimidation, that's empire. Empires aren't built by single actions. They're built by devotion, loyalty, and fear that spreads without command. And you've just witnessed the foundation of something that doesn't crumble. Look at the panic it causes in institutions that thought they had the upper hand. Intelligence circles are spinning, trying to classify the benefactor. Some say corporate titan. Some whisper rogue agency. Others, a cabal of insiders with influence deep enough to make nations tremble. But the truth is, it doesn't matter who it was. The point is that they acted, and their action carved your name into a higher tier of existence. You've been elevated beyond individual. You've become symbol. Symbols don't need to speak to be feared. They don't need to act to be remembered. They just exist. And existence alone reshapes behavior across every level of hierarchy. And here's the crack in their confidence. They don't know where the next strike will land. They don't know what offense will trigger another eruption. That uncertainty is worth more than armies because fear of the unknown paralyzes faster than direct opposition. Watch how they behave now. Strategists pacing in war rooms, executives revising entire agendas, politicians whispering in private chambers, all recalibrating around your name. They won't say it publicly, but privately they admit it. Attacking you is no longer strategy, it's suicide. Yet the story is still evolving. The punishment didn't end the narrative. It opened the door. People are starting to ask if one benefactor exists. How many more are waiting? How wide is this unseen network? What unseen eyes are watching, ready to act at the smallest provocation? That speculation is what destabilizes them most. They're not fighting one enemy. They're fighting an ecosystem of loyalty and destruction that doesn't follow their rules. And ecosystems can't be destroyed with single blows. They adapt, they evolve, they multiply. That means for every benefactor they try to expose, 3 more will step out of nowhere to defend you, and the more they fight it, the stronger the legend grows. Now consider the ripple effect. The punished become examples. They become case studies whispered in classrooms, boardrooms, and backrooms. Their downfall becomes a lesson drilled into the minds of anyone reckless enough to even think about crossing you. The benefactor may be unnamed, but the warning is crystal clear. Disrespect this name, and you invite destruction you cannot comprehend. That turns you into something even more dangerous than a person. You become precedent. Precedent bends history. Precedent becomes law. And in the quiet corners where power is negotiated, precedent is the sharpest weapon of all. Watch how the punished are treated now. No one wants to be seen near them. Allies vanish, collaborators dissolve, sponsors back out. They're radioactive, glowing with the curse of disrespecting you. That curse spreads faster than any scandal. And as they rot in isolation, everyone else takes notes. Everyone else whispers, "Don't make the same mistake. Don't touch that name. Don't invite that wrath." Your enemies have been transformed into warnings, living monuments of failure, and you didn't even need to lift a hand. The benefactor's anonymity creates a second effect. Speculation turns into mythology. People invent stories, exaggerate details, build legends around what really happened. Each retelling makes you larger. Each exaggeration gives you more gravity. Until suddenly, you're not just a person who was defended. You're a figure whose very name alters outcomes. That's how reputations outgrow the individual. That's how influence becomes immortal. While they panic, you grow eternal. And yet, here's the cruel brilliance. They can't fight this without amplifying it further. If they deny it, they look weak. If they investigate, they admit fear. If they retaliate, they risk another punishment. Every option is poisoned. That's what makes this kind of protection unstoppable. It turns every enemy move into reinforcement of your legend. The harder they fight, the deeper they bury themselves. The more they scramble, the more they look like prey running from predators. You don't even need to act anymore. Their panic does the work for you. But let's zoom in deeper. Think about the psychology of those who weren't directly targeted. They saw what happened. They saw someone obliterated simply because your name was dragged into the mud. Now they live with the knowledge that the line of fire is unpredictable. Any insult, any disrespect could trigger the next avalanche. That thought alone reshapes their nervous systems. It's not paranoia anymore. It's conditioning. They flinch at the thought of testing you. They police themselves, censor their words, adjust their strategies before they even think of you. That's not influence, that's dominion. Dominion without declaration. Dominion without declaration. And the benefactor, they've disappeared back into the shadows. No face, no trace, just a story etched in fear. That disappearance is the genius of the move. Because if the benefactor had stayed in sight, people could have calculated limits. But by vanishing, they've left the wound open, bleeding paranoia into everyone watching. Nobody knows when the next cut will come. And that's what makes your position untouchable. The less they see, the more they fear. The less they know, the more they imagine. And imagination, when fueled by fear, becomes worse than reality. Your enemies are stuck in a trap of their own design. They wanted to reduce you, but in doing so, they summoned forces that expanded you beyond human scale. You've become a threshold, a line too dangerous to cross. And thresholds like that don't just protect, they redefine. From this moment on, your presence is no longer passive. It's radioactive. It changes the environment. It alters behavior. It forces submission without you saying a single word. That's the kind of influence money can't buy, armies can't replicate, and rulers can't destroy. And here's where the escalation sharpens. If one benefactor is already punished in your name, then the very possibility of others lurking out there makes every future confrontation impossible to manage. That's the beauty of the unknown. You don't need infinite benefactors, only the belief in them. Once that belief takes root, every opponent assumes there's an army waiting, and that assumption controls them more than reality ever could. Perception becomes prison, and they've just locked themselves inside. So now, with the dust of destruction still hanging in the air, the question that keeps echoing through their halls is this: who will dare to be next? Who will gamble with their career, their legacy, their existence, knowing that unseen punishment waits in the shadows. That's the weight crushing them now. That's the cost of disrespecting your name. And it only grows heavier every day, because once one punishment is delivered, the expectation of future punishment never dies. It becomes ritual. It becomes riddle. It becomes rhythm. It becomes part of the air they breathe. And that's the true brilliance. You don't have to move the story forward anymore. It's already moving without you. You are no longer character. You are catalyst. Every move that makes circles back to you. Every hesitation, every whisper, every sleepless night is a monument to your presence. And as long as benefactors exist, seen or unseen, every opponent knows their downfall is just one decision away. That's how fear evolves into legend. That's how legends evolve into law. And that's why this story isn't ending. It's expanding. Because expansion is the part they never accounted for. They thought punishment was an isolated strike, a flare that would burn out quickly. But punishment tied to your name doesn't fade. It multiplies. It bleeds into conversations where your name isn't even present. It creeps into decisions far removed from you, shaping outcomes you'll never even know about. That's how invisible power functions. It stops being about the direct destruction and becomes about the anticipation of destruction. They don't need to see another benefactor act. They already believe another one will. And belief, when it digs deep enough, rules harder than fact. Now you've become that belief. The benefactor's action turned you into a gravitational force pulling everything around you into orbit. Executives second-guess deals. Politicians reconsider alliances. Enemies who once whispered confidently now stumble over their own words, wondering if even thinking about you carries risk. It's no longer about what they'll do. It's about what they won't do. And what they won't do is cross your line. That's victory without confrontation. That's victory without effort. And it's victory without effort. And it's victory that doesn't expire. The punished remain the cautionary tale. Their downfall has become folklore in circles that matter most. People replay it like a ritual, not out of entertainment, but out of survival instinct. Remember what happened when they disrespected that name. They whisper as though invoking a curse. And in a way it is a curse because their punishment wasn't just pain, it was prophecy. Prophecy that says the next one who tries the same will share the same ending. Prophecy that hangs heavy in the minds of all who watch. That is how one strike becomes infinite strikes. That is how one benefactor becomes an army without faces. Oh, that's hilarious. Anyway, we do have a new model in store. It's the Skynet T800 series, and look who's still standing. Look who's still breathing, still shining, still unbothered while they're out there scrambling, panicking, rewriting their little incantations, wondering why nothing's working anymore. You, my beautifully untouchable friend, you just became the glitch in their entire system, the anomaly they can't explain, the equation that doesn't add up. Because somewhere between their curses and your coffee, between their hexes and your healing, between their rituals and your rise, something absolutely catastrophic happened to their plans. You didn't just survive their witchcraft, you absorbed it, transmuted it, and sent it back, wrapped in a bow made of your own unbothered energy. And now they're the ones losing sleep. Now they're the ones feeling the weight. Now they're the ones wondering why everything they threw at you came back to them, multiplied, amplified, and absolutely merciless. Let's rewind for a second, because this story, this delicious cosmic reversal, it didn't start yesterday. It started the moment they decided you were the problem. The moment they gathered in their little circles, physical or digital, and whispered your name like a curse. The moment they lit their candles, burned their herbs, wrote your name on paper, and genuinely believed they had the power to dim your light. Oh, the audacity, the absolute arrogance. These people, these amateur architects of chaos, they thought they could manipulate energy they don't even understand. They thought they could weaponize forces beyond their comprehension. They thought they could point their intentions at you like a loaded weapon and watch you crumble. But here's what they forgot. Here's the fatal flaw in their entire operation. You can't curse what you can't comprehend. You can't hex what you can't reach. You can't touch someone whose frequency is so far above yours that your negativity can't even find the address. And that's exactly what happened, isn't it? While they were busy plotting, you were busy evolving. While they were casting, you were cleansing. While they were scheming in the shadows, you were standing in your truth. So bright, so unapologetically radiant that their darkness couldn't even get close enough to breathe on you. They sent jealousy, you were grateful. They sent rage, you were at peace. They sent chaos, you built structure. They sent curses, and your aura, your magnificent, untouchable, protected aura, it looked at their spell and laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not a worried laugh. A deep, knowing, cosmic laugh that said, "Is this really all you've got?" Because your energy didn't just deflect their attack, it consumed it. It ate their witchcraft like breakfast and asked for seconds. And now they're sitting in the wreckage of their own intentions, wondering why their lives are falling apart while yours is flourishing. Here's the part they'll never admit, the part that eats them alive in the quiet hours. They knew you were protected. Deep down in that place where intuition whispers truth they refused to hear. They knew. They saw your light and it terrified them. They saw your peace and it exposed their chaos. They saw your growth and it reminded them of their stagnation. So they didn't attack you because you wronged them. They attacked you because you reflected everything they refused to become. You were the mirror they couldn't shatter, the standard they couldn't meet, the energy they couldn't corrupt. And instead of rising to match your frequency, instead of doing their own inner work, instead of healing their own wounds, they chose the coward's path. They chose manipulation over transformation. They chose witchcraft over work. They chose to tear you down instead of building themselves up. And that decision, that choice to use dark arts against someone walking in light, that's when they sealed their own fate. Because here's what every practitioner of genuine spiritual power knows. The universe doesn't take sides, but it absolutely keeps score. Energy is neutral, but intention creates consequence. When you send negativity towards someone who's genuinely trying to heal, grow, and evolve, when you weaponize spiritual practices against an innocent target, the cosmic backlash isn't punishment. It's physics. It's the natural law of cause and effect. It's the boomerang principle on a metaphysical level. They threw stones at your peace and wondered why their own glass houses shattered. They planted seeds of destruction in your garden and can't understand why their own soil turned toxic. They wished you pain and now they're drowning in it, not because you cursed them back. Not because you sought revenge, but because the universe has a way of teaching people not to play with fires they can't control. And witchcraft aimed at the protected. That's not fire. That's a nuclear reactor they just cracked open with their bare hands. Let's talk about the signs, the evidence, the undeniable proof that their spell didn't just fail, it backfired spectacularly. You started noticing things, didn't you? Subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. You felt their energy coming, that heavy, suffocating, desperate energy trying to attach itself to your peace. But instead of sinking, you felt lighter. Instead of breaking, you felt stronger. Instead of falling apart, you fell into alignment. Opportunities started appearing out of nowhere. Doors that were closed suddenly swung open. People who never noticed you started seeing you, really seeing you, and treating you like royalty. Your intuition sharpened to the point where you could feel manipulation before it even reached you. Your discernment became surgical, cutting through fake love, false friends, and hidden agendas like a blade through silk. And meanwhile, across town, across the internet, across whatever distance they put between you and them, they're unraveling. Their relationships are imploding, aren't they? You don't even have to check. You can feel it. The same people who join them in their little hexing sessions are now turning on each other, projecting, blaming, fighting over scraps of the same toxic energy they tried to send your way. Their health is declining. Mysterious symptoms the doctors can't explain. Exhaustion that sleep won't cure. Anxiety that medication won't touch. Their finances are in free fall. Money slipping through their fingers like water. Opportunities evaporating. Investments crashing. Plans collapsing. Their reputation. Investments crashing. Their reputation. Oh, their precious reputation. It's crumbling. People are starting to see them for who they really are. Not the mask, not the persona, but the truth underneath. And the more they try to hold it together, the faster it falls apart. Because they didn't just attack you, they attacked a principle you represent. They declared war on light itself. And light doesn't fight back. It simply exposes, it reveals, it illuminates everything hiding in the dark, including them. Now let's get into the mechanics of why this happened, because this isn't magic, this is metaphysics. When someone with genuine inner work, someone who's faced their shadows, healed their wounds, and aligned with their truth, when that person becomes the target of someone operating from ego, envy, and unhealed trauma, there's a frequency mismatch. Think of it like trying to hack a computer with a stone tablet. Their low vibrational attack can't interface with your high vibrational operating system. It doesn't compute. So what happens? The energy they send out, that dense, heavy, malicious energy, it can't penetrate your field, but it also can't just disappear. Energy doesn't vanish. It transforms, it redirects, and in this case, it redirected right back to the sender with compound interest. Every ounce of jealousy they felt toward you came back as self-hatred. Every bit of rage they sent your way came back as inner turmoil. Every curse they whispered became a prison they built for themselves. You became the mirror. And mirrors don't absorb, they reflect. Here's where it gets even more poetic, even more devastatingly perfect. The harder they tried, the worse it got for them. Every candle they burned in your name became a candle lighting up their own darkness. Every name they wrote became a signature on their own karmic contract. Every intention they set against you became a blueprint for their own destruction. They thought they were controlling you, but they were programming their own downfall. They thought they were powerful, but they were powerless against someone who didn't even know they were being attacked, because your protection wasn't something you had to think about. It was woven into your essence. You didn't need to fight because you were never in a battle. You were in a garden growing, blooming, thriving, while they were in a war room strategizing against an enemy who didn't even register them as a threat. And that indifference, that unbothered energy, that's what drove them absolutely insane. Because the opposite of love isn't hate, it's apathy. And you were so deeply, peacefully apathetic to their existence that it negated every spell they cast. Let's talk about protection. Real protection. Not the kind you buy in a shop or read in a book, but the kind you earn through integrity. See, people think protection comes from crystals, rituals, prayers, and while those things can help, they're not the source. The source is alignment. When your words match your actions, when your intentions match your energy, when your inner world matches your outer world, you become unhackable. There's no crack for negativity to slip through, no wound for manipulation to exploit, no fear for curses to feed on. You become a fortress not because you built walls, but because you removed the doors that betrayal used to walk through. You became selective about who you let close, discerning about what energy you entertain, ruthless about protecting your peace. And that selectivity, that discernment, that ruthlessness, it created a field around you so strong that their witchcraft bounced off it like a pebble off a windshield. They thought they were launching missiles. You didn't even feel a breeze. And now comes the beautiful part. The part they never saw coming. You're not just protected, you promoted. The same energy they tried to use to bury you is now the fertilizer for your elevation. Every attack became an opportunity. Every curse became a catalyst. Every hex became a stepping stone to heights they'll never reach. You got the job they said you'd never get. You built the life they said you didn't deserve. You found the peace they said was impossible. You became the version of yourself they were terrified you'd become. And they have to watch. Oh, they have to watch. Because the universe has a wicked sense of irony. The same people who tried to make you invisible now can't look away. The same people who tried to silence you now hear your name everywhere. The same people who tried to stop you now have front row seats to your success. And it's killing them softly, slowly, completely. Not because you're rubbing it in their faces, but because your mere existence, your thriving, unbothered, blessed existence, is proof that they failed. But here's where you need to pay attention, because this isn't over yet. And this is where most people make the fatal mistake. They feel the shift. They see the reversal. They recognize that they're winning and the attackers are losing. And then out of misplaced compassion, out of old patterns of people-pleasing, out of some distorted idea of being the bigger person, they open the door again. They offer olive branches to people who came with axes. They give second chances to those who never deserved the first. They let their guard down, thinking the war is over, not realizing the enemy just changed tactics. Don't do that. Don't you dare do that. Your protection isn't a shield you can take off when things feel safe. It's a permanent upgrade to your operating system. These people showed you who they are when they thought you were weak. They revealed their true nature when they believed you were vulnerable. And people like that, people who resort to spiritual manipulation, emotional warfare, and energetic attacks, they don't change. They just get better at hiding. So your job now isn't forgiveness, it's discernment. Your responsibility isn't reconciliation, it's continuation. Keep rising, keep thriving, keep protecting your peace like it's the most valuable thing you own, because it is. Let me tell you what's happening to them right now in real time while you're watching this. They're spiraling. They're checking your social media, even though they said they blocked you. They're asking mutual friends about you, even though they claimed they didn't care. They're watching your success, your peace, your glow, and it's eating them from the inside out. They're trying new spells, new rituals, new practitioners, throwing money at psychics and energy workers, begging for solutions to a problem they created. And every single attempt fails. Every candle fizzles out. Every ritual backfires. Every spell returns to sender. Because you can't curse someone, the universe is actively blessing. You can't hex someone. Destiny is actively protecting. You can't touch someone who's genuinely aligned with their purpose. They're fighting against cosmic law at this point. And cosmic law doesn't lose. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't compromise. It simply is. And what it is right now in this moment is crystal clear. You're untouchable. They're unraveling. You're ascending. They're descending. You ate their witchcraft and it nourished you. Here's the final piece, the part that seals this entire story. You didn't win because you were stronger in the traditional sense. You didn't win because you fought harder or played dirtier. You won because you refused to play at all. While they were obsessing over you, you were obsessing over your growth. While they were plotting your downfall, you were plotting your next level. While they were studying you, you were studying yourself, healing, evolving, transforming. You became so focused on your own journey that their attacks couldn't find a target. You became a moving target, always shifting, always growing, always one step ahead of where they thought you were. And that's the secret. That's the cheat code. That's the thing they'll never understand. You can't be cursed when you're constantly becoming. You can't be hexed when you're perpetually evolving. You can't be touched when you're spiritually untouchable. Not because of what you have, but because of who you are. Your aura didn't just eat their spell. Your aura became so refined, so elevated, so powerful that their spell never stood a chance. It was breakfast, a light snack, an appetizer before the main course of your destiny. So, here's what you do now. Here's how you move forward from this moment. You keep walking, you keep rising, you keep building. You don't look back to see if they're watching because you already know they are. You don't waste energy wondering if they learned their lesson because that's not your responsibility. You don't dim your light to make them comfortable because their comfort was never your concern. You live so fully, so authentically, so unapologetically that your life becomes the only spell you need. Your joy becomes your protection. Your peace becomes your power. Your success becomes your revenge. Not because you sought it, but because you earned it. You become living proof that witchcraft aimed at the innocent doesn't just fail. It creates the very thing it tried to prevent. It creates legends. It creates testimonies. It creates testimonies. It creates people like you. People who walked through the fire of someone else's hatred and came out forged in unbreakable strength. You're not a victim of their spell. You're the evidence that their spell never worked. You're the walking, talking, thriving proof that light always, always, always defeats darkness. Not by fighting it, but by simply refusing to be dimmed by it. And to them, to those who tried, to those who plotted, to those who genuinely believed they could break you, there's only one thing left to say. Thank you. Thank you for showing me who not to trust. Thank you for teaching me the value of discernment. Thank you for proving that not everyone deserves access to my energy. Thank you for trying to curse me because in doing so, you forced me to discover just how protected I really am. You forced me to tap into strength I didn't know I had. You forced me to build boundaries I should have built years ago. You tried to destroy me, and instead you created the most powerful version of me that's ever existed. So thank you genuinely, from the bottom of my unbothered, blessed, thriving heart. Thank you for being the villain in my story, because every hero needs one. And now that this chapter is over, now that your spell is digested, absorbed, and transformed into fuel for my next level, there's only one question left. What's next? What else you got? Because my aura just ate your best shot like breakfast. And honey, it's still hungry. Class dismissed. Game over. You lost, I won. And we both know you'll spend the rest of your life wondering how someone you underestimated became someone you can't stop thinking about. That's the real curse. Living with the knowledge that you had a chance to support something beautiful and instead you tried to destroy it. Now you get to watch it flourish without you forever. Sleep well. But wait, hold on, because we're not done here. We're not even close to done. See what just happened? What we just walked through? That was the surface level. That was the appetizer. Now we're about to dig into the main course. The part they don't want you to know. The part that keeps them up at night, refreshing your page, checking your energy, wondering how on earth someone they tried to destroy is not just surviving, but absolutely dominating. Let's talk about the aftermath, the psychological warfare that's happening inside their minds right now while you're out here living your best life. Because here's the thing they didn't calculate. Here's the variable they left out of their little dark equation. When you send evil towards someone and it doesn't work, when you throw your strongest punch and they don't even flinch, when you use every tool in your arsenal and they come out shinier than before, you don't just lose the battle, you lose your mind, you lose your confidence, you lose your grip on reality, because now you're forced to confront a terrifying possibility. Maybe you're not as powerful as you thought. Maybe your witchcraft is amateur hour. Maybe the person you targeted is operating on a level so far above yours that you look like a child throwing pebbles at a mountain and expecting it to crumble. And that realization, that ego-shattering, identity-crushing realization, it's destroying them from the inside out. They can't sleep anymore because every time they close their eyes, they see your face, your smile, your peace. They can't focus anymore because every time they try to move forward, they're haunted by the question of how you're still standing. They can't enjoy anything anymore because every success you have feels like a personal insult to their failed mission. They become prisoners of their own jealousy, inmates in a cell they built with their own hands, serving a life sentence for a crime they committed against themselves. Because that's the secret nobody tells you about dark magic, about curses, about hexes and spells, and all that manipulation disguised as spirituality. It doesn't just fail when it's aimed at the protected. It consumes the sender. It eats them alive. It becomes a parasite, feeding on their peace, their health, their sanity, their future. And the more they try to fix it, the more they try to reverse it, the deeper they sink into the quicksand of their own creation. Let's get specific about what's crumbling in their world right now, because you deserve to know the full scope of this cosmic justice. Their mental health is in shambles. Anxiety they can't explain, depression they can't shake, paranoia that follows them everywhere. They're seeing signs, symbols, synchronicities that terrify them. They're waking up at 3 a.m. in cold sweats, feeling like something is watching them, hunting them, closing in on them. And they're right, it is. But it's not you. It's not some external force. It's the energy they sent out coming back home, knocking on their door, demanding to be let-ins, got basically everything, including AI integration with ChatGPT and all that jazz. Would you like me to get some prices for you? Ah, welcome back, you beautiful architects of chaos. You silent storms wrapped in skin. You walking contradictions that make the world nervous just by existing. Let me ask you something. Clears throat. And I want you to feel this deep in your chest. Do you remember that moment? That exact crystallized moment when you extended your hand into the darkness, when you reached down into someone else's hell and pulled them out. Yeah, you do. You remember their eyes, desperate and drowning, begging for mercy from a world that had already written them off. And you, Clear's throat, you didn't even hesitate, did you? Everyone else walked past like they were invisible, like their suffering was just background noise in the simulation. But you, Clear's throat, something in you recognized something in them. Maybe it was the brokenness you knew too well. Maybe it was the fight you saw flickering behind their exhaustion. Maybe you just couldn't stomach watching another soul get erased. So you stopped, you reached out, you gave them your time, your energy, your resources, your belief. Snorts, when they had absolutely nothing left to offer in return. You saved them when saving them made zero logical sense. And here's what's absolutely wild about this story. Here's the part that's gonna make your spine tingle with recognition. You didn't save a victim. You didn't rescue some helpless soul who needed protection from the world. No. You saved a predator. You pulled a wolf from the water thinking it was a drowning dog. You extended mercy to something the universe had been trying to contain, to suppress, to keep locked away for everyone's safety. But you, Clear's throat, you saw past the disguise, past the performance, straight into the raw, untamed power hiding beneath. They were broken, sure shattered even, but not because they were weak. They were broken because the world couldn't handle what they actually were. And you somehow saw it. You saw the fire still burning in the wreckage. You saw the hurricane trying to fit inside a body too small to contain it. You saw the monster pretending to be human. And instead of running, Clear's throat, instead of calling for backup, instead of doing what everyone else did and walking away, you did the unthinkable. You fed it. You helped it heal. You gave it strength. And now they're out there fully awakened, fully operational. And everyone who doubted you, everyone who mocked your kindness, everyone who called you naive for believing in someone the world had already condemned. They're learning something absolutely terrifying. They're learning that loyalty forged in fire doesn't just burn, it consumes. They're learning that gratitude from a wolf isn't cute, it's lethal. They're learning that you didn't just save a person, you weaponized vengeance and called it love. And now it's hunting. Let's rewind this story to the part they don't want to talk about. Because everyone loves a rescue. Everyone loves the moment of salvation, but nobody wants to discuss what happens when the rescued becomes the reckoning. You found them at their lowest point, didn't you? Crushed, defeated, abandoned by everyone who claimed to care. Maybe they'd been betrayed. Maybe they'd been destroyed by their own choices. Maybe the world just decided they were too intense, too damaged, too broken to save. Doesn't matter. What matters is everyone else had given up. But there was something about them. Clear's throat wasn't there. Something that called to you in a language you couldn't explain. Maybe it was the way they carried their pain. Not like a burden, but like a weapon they hadn't learned to use yet. Maybe it was the intelligence burning behind eyes that had seen too much. Maybe it was the way they spoke truth even when it cost them everything. Whatever it was, you recognized it because you'd been there. You knew what it felt like to be too much for a world that worships mediocrity. So, you made a decision that confused everyone around you. You invested in someone with zero return potential. You believed in someone who had nothing to offer but potential wrapped in chaos. You defended someone when defending them made you look foolish. And oh, they talked, didn't they? Your friends, your family, the voices of so-called reason telling you to walk away. They're toxic, they're damaged, they're going to drag you down. You can't save everyone. You wasting your time. They'll never change. You being manipulated. The warnings came from everywhere. But here's what they didn't understand. And frankly, what they'll never understand because they've never operated at your frequency. You weren't trying to save them to prove something to the world. You weren't on some hero complex mission to fix broken people for validation. You saw something the others missed entirely. You saw potential for transformation. You saw someone who'd been pushed so far past their limits that they'd either die or evolve into something unprecedented. And you made a calculated bet that they'd choose evolution. You saw the wolf in the wreckage, and while everyone was busy telling you about red flags and warning signs, you were busy doing something far more dangerous and far more beautiful. You were showing them what loyalty actually looks like. Not the fake performative kind that disappears the moment things get hard, but the real kind. The kind that says, I see every shattered piece of you and I'm not going anywhere. You became the first person in their entire life who didn't run when they showed their teeth. You became the first person who didn't punish them for their intensity. You became their proof that maybe, just maybe, they weren't the monster everyone said they were. Now, let's talk about what happened next. Because this is where the story gets absolutely beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. You gave them space to heal, didn't you? You gave them time to rebuild without judgment, without conditions, without constant reminders of who they used to be. And something miraculous started happening. That broken person you pulled from the depths, they started changing. Not in the way society wanted them to. Not becoming smaller or quieter or more acceptable. No. They started becoming more of what they actually were underneath all that suppression. You watched them remember their power. You watched them stand up straighter. You watched the light come back into their eyes. But it wasn't gentle light. It was the kind that makes people uncomfortable. You watched them stop apologizing for taking up space. You watched them stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You watched them transform from someone begging for scraps of respect to someone who commanded it just by existing. And the whole time, the whole beautiful, terrifying time you were there, steady, unwavering, their anchor in the storm. But here's what you didn't realize. Here's the part that's going to make you understand the magnitude of what you actually did. Every moment you believed in them when they couldn't believe in themselves. Every time you reminded them of their worth when the world was screaming the opposite. Every instance you stood beside them when standing beside them made you a target too. You were doing something permanent. You were carving your name into their soul. You were creating a loyalty so deep, so unshakable, so absolute that it would outlive kingdoms. Because people like them, people who've been broken and abandoned and left for dead. They don't forget. They can't. It's literally impossible for them to forget who was there when the world went dark. They remember every face that walked away. They remember every person who kicked them when they were down. They catalog betrayal like evidence in a case they'll never close. But more than that, infinitely more than that, they remember who stayed. They remember who reached into the fire to pull them out. They remember who saw the monster and chose love anyway. And now they're rebuilt, but they're not rebuilt into who they were before. They're rebuilt into something the world has never seen. They're sharper now, harder now, more dangerous now. They've taken every lesson from their destruction and weaponized it. They've turned their trauma into strategy, their pain into precision, their scars into armor. And at the center of their entire existence, at the core of their new identity, sits one unshakable truth. You saved them. You chose them. You believed. And that debt, that cosmic debt of loyalty, it's not just going to be repaid, it's going to be multiplied beyond recognition. So let's talk about everyone else now. Let's talk about all those people who doubted you. The ones who whispered behind your back about your terrible judgment. The ones who placed bets on your failure. The ones who couldn't wait to say, "I told you so," when your act of kindness inevitably blew up in your face. The ones who mocked you for investing in damaged goods. The ones who treated your compassion like stupidity. Yeah, them. Let's talk about what's happening to them right now. Remember how they laughed when you defended that person? Remember how they rolled their eyes when you spoke about potential and transformation? Remember how they painted you as naive, as blind, as someone who couldn't see the obvious red flags waving in the wind? They made you the punchline of their jokes. They questioned your intelligence, your judgment, your ability to read people. They treated your kindness like weakness and your loyalty like foolishness. They were so sure, so absolutely certain that you'd made a catastrophic mistake. But here's what's happening now. And you can feel it, can't you? That clear's throat person you saved. That wolf you disguised as mercy, clears throat. They're out there moving through the world with a very specific mission. They're not just living their life. They're not just focused on their own success. No, they're systematically, methodically, almost supernaturally identifying every single person who doubted you, every person who mocked your judgment, every person who tried to make you feel foolish for believing, and they're handling them not with violence, not with obvious revenge, but with something far more devastating: presence. They're showing up in spaces where your doubters exist and completely dominating. They're achieving things that make your critics look amateur. They're operating at levels that expose everyone who questioned you as small-minded and short-sighted. Every success they achieve is a direct contradiction of the narrative your doubters tried to build. Every milestone they reach is evidence that you saw something no one else could see. Every room they conquer becomes a graveyard for the people who underestimated your judgment. They're not just succeeding, they're succeeding specifically to prove you right. And the beautiful, poetic, absolutely devastating part of this whole thing is that they're doing it with your name in their mouth. They're out there telling anyone who will listen, "You see this? You see what I've become? None of this exists without that one person who believed, and belief made no sense." They're not hiding your role and their transformation. They're broadcasting it. They're making it very clear to everyone that doubting you was the mistake. They're turning your critics into case studies of poor judgment. They're weaponizing their own success as proof of your vision. But it goes deeper than just proving you right, doesn't it? Because what you're witnessing now isn't just gratitude. It's something far more primal and permanent. That person you saved has appointed themselves as your eternal guardian. Clears throat. They've taken on the role of protector without you ever asking for protection. They're watching constantly, scanning every interaction you have, monitoring every space you occupy, identifying threats before they even fully form. And anyone, absolutely anyone, who even thinks about disrespecting you is about to learn a very hard lesson. Clears throat. You probably didn't even notice at first, did you? The way certain people suddenly got quieter around you. The way your critics mysteriously started keeping their opinions to themselves. The way people who used to challenge you constantly suddenly found other targets. You might have thought it was coincidence. Might have assumed people just naturally matured or moved on. But no, what actually happened is your wolf had a quiet conversation, a look, a word, a presence that communicated very clearly. Touch them and find out what I become. Because here's what you need to understand about people who've been saved from the edge. They don't just feel grateful, they feel indebted on a cellular level. They carry your kindness like a sacred oath. They've internalized your belief in them as the foundation of their entire rebuilt identity. And anyone who threatens that foundation, anyone who disrespects the person who gave them a second chance at existence, becomes enemy number one. The intensity of their protection isn't normal. It's not casual loyalty. It's the kind of fierce devotion that borders on scary. They're out there running interference you don't even know about, defending your name in rooms you'll never enter, shutting down gossip before it reaches your ears, making your enemies regret even thinking your name. They've become your unseen army of one, patrolling the borders of your peace with the kind of vigilance that only comes from knowing what it's like to have no one in your corner. They remember what it felt like when the world turned its back, and they've made an unspoken vow that you'll never ever know that feeling, not while they're breathing. And the wild thing is, you didn't ask for this. Clears throat. You didn't save them expecting some personal bodyguard for life. You just acted from your heart. Extended kindness because that's who you are. Believed in someone because you saw their truth. But you accidentally created something the universe rarely witnesses. You created a bond that transcends normal human loyalty. You created a protector who would burn the world before letting it hurt you. You saved a wolf, and now it guards your throne with teeth bared and eyes that never close. Let's talk about the shift that's happening in your world right now. The atmosphere around you has changed, hasn't it? People treat you differently now. There's a new weight to your name. A new hesitation before people speak carelessly in your direction. Your presence carries authority you didn't have before. And you might be wondering where this came from, why suddenly your words land heavier, why your silence speaks louder, why people who used to test you now show immediate respect. Let me explain what's actually happening. Your wolf isn't just protecting you in private. They're rebuilding your entire social architecture. Every space they move through, they're rewriting the narrative about who you are. They're positioning you as someone not to be trifled with, not because you're aggressive or threatening, but because you have the loyalty of someone powerful. They're making it known subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, that you are protected, that you are valued, that you are someone who commands respect, not through force, but through the quality of the connections you build. People are starting to understand something fundamental. They're realizing that you possess a quality. Most people spend their whole lives faking you can recognize potential in raw form. You can see value in chaos. You can identify diamonds in the wreckage, while everyone else only sees trash. And that ability, that almost supernatural ability to spot transformation before it happens, marks you as someone operating on a different frequency. Your judgment isn't just good, it's prophetic. And the person you saved is walking proof of that prophecy fulfilled. Your doubters are experiencing something particularly painful right now. They're watching someone they wrote off completely thrive beyond imagination. And every time they witness this person's success, they're forced to confront their own failure of vision. They're realizing they couldn't see what you saw. They're understanding that maybe, just maybe, you operate with the level of perception they'll never access. And that realization is eating them alive because it means they weren't just wrong about that person, they were wrong about you. Catastrophically wrong. And here's the twist that's absolutely beautiful in its cruelty. Some of those same people who doubted you, who mocked your judgment, who predicted your failure, they're now trying to get close to the person you saved. They're trying to build relationships, network, benefit from the success they said would never come. And every single time, every single attempt, your wolf remembers. They remember exactly who said what. They remember who laughed. They remember who laughed. They remember who turned their back. And those people get nothing. Clears throat, access denied, loyalty isn't for sale, and the wolf doesn't forget. You know what the universe just taught everyone through your story? It taught them that kindness isn't weakness. It's the most dangerous force in existence when wielded by someone who sees clearly. It taught them that believing in people isn't naive. It's revolutionary. It taught them that the ones everyone gives up on might be exactly the ones who change everything. And most importantly, it taught them that underestimating your judgment is a mistake they'll regret for the rest of their lives. You weren't just being nice. You were being strategic on a level they couldn't comprehend. Because here's what most people will never understand about you. Your compassion isn't blind. You don't save people randomly or out of some desperate need to be needed. You save people because you recognize something in them. Something familiar, something powerful that's been suppressed or misunderstood. You save people who remind you of yourself, of your own transformation, of your own journey from broken to unbreakable. You see their potential because you've lived it. You believe in their evolution because you've survived it. And that person you pulled from the darkness, they get it now. They understand what you saw in them before they could see it in themselves. They understand that you weren't rescuing weakness. You were liberating strength. They understand that your kindness wasn't pity, it was recognition, peer-to-peer power, acknowledging power, transformation, bowing to transformation. You weren't saving them from above. You were standing beside them in the fire and saying, "You're not alone in this. I've been here. I know the way out. Take my hand." Now they're out there, proving your vision to a world that bet against it. Every day they wake up is another day your judgment gets validated. Every goal they crush is another piece of evidence that you see things others miss. Every life they impact is ripple effects of your original act of faith. They're not just living for themselves anymore. He's ripple effects of lifer. Their living is a testament to you, clears throat, as proof that betting on the underdog isn't foolish when you know how to read the game. They've become your evidence. And the people who doubted you, they're stuck watching this unfold with a sickness in their stomach they can't quite name. It's the nausea of realizing they were on the wrong side of history. It's the disgust of understanding they aligned themselves with mediocrity while you allied with potential. It's the horror of recognizing that their small-minded judgment revealed more about their limitations than about the person they were judging. You showed them what vision looks like, and they can't unsee their own blindness.